Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to today's Scottish Golf Zoom panel call, where I'm delighted to be joined by Adam Phillips and Martin Ritchie from our handicapping and course rating team here at Scottish Golf. I'm David Kernahan, and on today's call, club officials from across Scotland will have the opportunity to hear from the team on some key areas of the World Handicap system as clubs get ready for the first full season under WHS. During the call, we will answer some of the most frequently asked questions we have received from clubs since WHS launched in Scotland. And we'll also highlight some of the key features and resources available to support you in your role. So without further delay, we'll get started. We will begin with a short presentation, followed by answering some of the most frequently asked questions. Don't forget, you can submit a question using the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, and we will do our best to answer these time permitting, but we have received a large volume of pre-submitted questions. So if we don't get to cover any of these live questions today, don't worry, we'll be uploading an FAQ on the back of this webinar and your question will be answered. It's also worth pointing out that many of the pre-submitted questions will be answered during the presentation. Get this presentation up. You see that okay there, Adam?
Yeah, all good.
Brilliant. So firstly, I thought it was really important to give an update on WHS since we went live. And as all clubs will be aware, we launched the new World Handicap system on the 2nd of November. Our system was live and working for all affiliated clubs and ISVs from 4 AM on the day of launch. This was a testament to the hard work that went into ensuring we were ready for launch. And it's extremely satisfying to see the system working accurately and the volume of golfers who have already embraced WHS. To date, the system has processed almost 220,000 scores from all providers, and all calculations have taken place correctly just before midnight. Out of this number, a staggering 25,000 general play scores have been submitted, 15,000 of these coming directly through the Scottish Golf app. This is over 11% of total scores, which is a massive confirmation of this new functionality in the system, and it's great to see so many golfers embracing this, and we know this number will also grow. Just to give you an idea, the old system, only about 1 to maybe 2% of total scores over the years submitted with supplementary scores. So to see this number already is just fantastic. Moving on to CDH Number Management. This is obviously the main topic that drives most of the emails into our inbox because this had been managed poorly under the old system with poor data quality. And this was the main reason some clubs had some issues when transitioning to WHS. It actually wasn't the initial calculation, which is shown when historical data was correct. We calculated the WHS index very accurately, and this was the case for most golfers. The transition to WHS highlighted just how challenging it was to manage a database that was administered locally but uploaded centrally. An example of this was the fact that we have roughly 370,000 CDH numbers for around 100,000 golfers who have a handicap. During transition, we have taken on a huge amount of administrative work to ensure inaccuracies within the data were resolved, and we've already replied to over 3,000 emails to help support clubs getting ready for WHS. The biggest issues we've had with clubs during the transition, as you can see on the slide here, was the number of golfers who were never actually issued a CDH number under the old system. And we've already now rectified that and provided 5,000 golfers with a CDH number who never actually had a CDH number under the old system as they should have. The number of golfers who were in conflict, which means they were never released or claimed correctly, and that was just over 2,000 at the time of change, and scores that were never uploaded to the database, and the number of duplicate scores that were uploaded to the previous database. We do get questions asking how can we view the old data, and when you're in the WHS CDH, you'll see a little tick box on the top right which says use CDH system. If you click on that and then view your records, you can see exactly what data was uploaded to the previous CDH and when. Moving on to the next slide here. We've also worked really hard as a team, as have golf clubs, getting ready for the new WHS system. And we've managed to cleanse over 120,000 duplicate CDH numbers. And now that we have a centralized system that offers far more functionality than the old system, it will be much easier for us to monitor and put requirements in place to ensure we are upholding the integrity of the handicap system and the CDH. This, along with our engagement with club officials like yourself to help golfers understand the process, will mean it'll be much easier for us to monitor and put requirements in place to stop inaccuracies from happening again. It's really important that a golfer knows their CDH number. Under the old Congo UHS, you could have awarded a CDH number and awarded a handicap, and the golfer would have not known any difference. They just would have continued on playing. But under the new system, because the scoring record, one golfer has one scoring record, when they change clubs, if you create a new CDH number, the golf will start from scratch and they'll be aware of this. So it's really important that one golfer has one CDH number and that follows them wherever they play golf. We will continue to monitor this and support clubs in this area. And we have already experienced the upload of incorrect data and information when creating CDH numbers. And we've also had an ISV creating invalid emails trying to process these on the platform to create CDH IDs. So once again, these requirements are in place to ensure we can verify a CDH number belongs to an individual. So if incorrect data is uploaded, it will create duplicate CDH numbers. So we need to ensure that this process is followed correctly. All clubs will have received communication from Scottish Golf about the importance of issuing CDH numbers for all golfers who may now wish to have a handicap, especially those who wish to have a handicap. And we would like to thank all clubs who've completed this process so far. However, at present, this number remains quite low. Worryingly, some clubs have indicated that they will refuse to generate CDH numbers for golfers who do not play in competitions. And some golfers have come to us directly for a CDH number, which we have and we will provide. It is important to remember that the main objective of WHS is to offer as many golfers as possible the opportunity to obtain and maintain a handicap. We have a shared responsibility across the game to promote growth and increase participation. And WHS is a great way to achieve this. So if a golfer does just want to have a handicap and all they want to submit is general play scores, this is allowed under WHS. So it's really important that you do award that golfer with a CDH number. We do ask that golf clubs continue to cleanse their database and go through the WHS CDH list to ensure only current members have access to a CDH. If you have golfers linked to your club who are not members, they will have access to the app and that CDH number, and they will be able to submit general play scores, and they will be able to enter open competitions without being a member of a club. And we know that this has happened in the past, that because if a golfer wasn't resigned correctly from a golf club, they still would have had that CDH number. They still would have been attached to your home club, and they have in the past been able to enter open competitions and play in those open competitions and keep a handicap up to date without actually being a member of a club. So it's really important that you access the WHS CDH, you go through your players list and you ensure that every single player on that list is a home member. And if they're not, please resign or release that player from your list. Lastly, on CDH management, we get a lot of emails about resigning and claiming a player. And I just wanted to confirm that every ISV can create a CDH number, as well as resign and claim a home player. This was part of the system. We built this into the APIs within the new software, as it was one of the asks from the providers that they still wanted to offer this service to the golf clubs that use their software. So we built this into the system so that all ISVs can continue to administer this. So please check with your provider to ensure you know how to action this correctly, as the process may have changed with WHS, but it is probably one of the biggest emails or biggest queries we get is how can I claim or resign a player? So please do check that you understand that process. I'm now going to hand over to Martin, who's going to run through the next part of the presentation.
Thanks, David. As mentioned, we're receiving a high number of inquiries regarding the WHS CDH. This includes how to access it and how to manage their golfers' records. You have three main resources to support clubs on WHS CDH. Firstly, there's the WHS CDH manual, which is available both on our website and the HIVE platform. HIVE is our digital platform, and if you've not already registered it, please email us and we can give you access. There's lots of useful information within that. And finally, you can get support from our Scottish Golf direct email at the handicapping email. Just want to give you a little bit more detail about the topics we get emailed about quite regularly. First of all, moving to adjustments. It's worthwhile pointing out that all handicap adjustments must be done through the WHS CDH platform. We're receiving a large number of emails from clubs asking if we can do this through the club's ISV software. Now that the function has been centralized, this is no longer possible. If you're unsure of your club's CDH login, please get in touch with us and we'll be able to help. An adjustment function tool was provided after the initial WHS calculation to help clubs try and align players' handicap index. However, some clubs have taken on unnecessary administrative tasks because they did not understand the initial calculation process or the WHS system. Transition calculation process was agreed by Kongu and did get most handicaps as accurate as possible. So the advice still remains the same. Encourage your players to submit scores, and the more scores that are on a player's record, the more accurate their WH index will be. Because of the nature of WHS, the club should not make minor adjustments to a player's handicap. For example, moving their index from 15.1 to 15.3. The reason for avoiding this is the next score on a player's record may change the index significantly due to the average scoring system of WHS. Clubs need to trust the methodology of the system. If only one reason to adjust the handicap index moving forward should be within their annual review. There is one further point I would like to clarify in the adjustment of an initial handicap. The way the system works for initial calculation is that it takes the lowest score of this differential and then implies a -2 adjustment. We have many clubs then making further adjustments to try and align the player's handicap to where they think it should be based on the 3 scores provided. This defeats the purpose of the initial calculation, and we would urge clubs to trust the way this has been designed. The player will see their handicap index adjust as more scores come onto their record. The instructions on this, how to apply adjustments, can be found on our WHS CDH manual as previously mentioned. Now looking at penalty scores. Penalty scores, like adjustments, can only be done through the WHS CDH platform. These will show on a player's record with the penalty box ticked, as shown in the slide. Where without good reason, a player does not return a score after participation in an authorised format of play, the National Association or Handicap Committee has the discretion to apply a penalty score to the player's record. In cases where they are satisfied that the score not being returned was for the purposes of gaining an unfair advantage, the committee will have a number of options which are detailed on the slide. Applying the highest or lowest score on a record as a penalty can be automated by the club, with the other 2 options on the slide left as open options for the club to apply at their discretion. If a player registers to play through the Scottish Golf app and fails to submit a score, they will automatically receive a penalty. That penalty can be deleted by the club and resubmitted if for any reason the player has an issue with submitting their score. If a player registers manually through the club's software, it is up to the club to decide what penalty will be applied to not returning a score. Moving on to initial handicap. Calculation is slightly different for initial handicap allocation, and this must be done through WHS CDH within the General Play tab, so that the correct adjustments can be made in order to calculate that player's index. If 9-hole rounds are used to calculate the index, the score is stored and added to the next 9-hole score that comes in. Once a player has an index, it will convert automatically back to scaling that 9-hole score up to an 18-hole scoring differential. One thing to watch out for is a player may have no scores on their record, but may have already been awarded a handicap index at transition. This is because they already had a Kongu handicap. For these players, 9-hole scores will be scaled up and not stored because they have already been given a handicap index. If scores are sent to the WHS platform from an ISV, they may not be calculated correctly for that initial handicap, especially if that ISV is scaling up and sending through an adjusted 18-hole score. Players can submit initial scores for handicap through the Scottish Golf app or manually as a general play score within the CDH, and the calculation will work out accurately. And moving on to general play scores. Under the rules of WHS, a player must pre-register their intent to submit a score for competition, and this is no different for general play scores. A player cannot decide during or after the round to submit a score. If this is found to be the case, the score cannot be used. Players must also pre-register in the manner set out by the National Association or their Handicap Committee. We have automated this within our app and built in other safeguards to ensure there is compliance. If a general play score is recorded through a club's software or by using a physical scorecard, then it is the responsibility of the club to ensure these scores are acceptable. All general play scores must be played in accordance with the rules of golf and handicapping. Within the WHS CDH, there's a function for submitting a score from within Scotland and also away from Scotland as a general play score. Details on this can be found within the CDH manual. Moving on to questions around about course and playing handicap. We're getting a lot of questions surrounding this topic, and we understand this may be confusing for some golfers, but as they play throughout the season and see how the system works, I'm sure it'll be easier for them to understand. So just for clarity, course handicap is the main handicap used. Golfers can obtain this from the handicap lookup charts provided or within the lookup function within the Scottish Golf app. This course handicap should be put on the scorecard, and it's what is used for the purpose of the round within the rules of golf. If a player does not use this, they will risk picking up on a hole where they may get a shot. Playing handicap is used to provide equity in a competition, and this is the stroke received for that format played. Playing handicap is calculated on the course handicap value retained at machine precision as per the WHS rules. 95% allowance is mandatory for both 9 and 18 holes, and this will automatically be applied within the handicapping software. And finally, a playing handicap should not be provided for a general play score. I'm now going to pass over to Adam to discuss the next part of the presentation.
Thank you, Martin. I'll now cover a few other common queries we are receiving on WHS. The first one we'll look at is the allowances for team format match play competitions compared to individual stroke play. Stroke play competitions are more straightforward for members to follow as it's the course handicap that players should remember to just put on their scorecard, as Martin mentioned, and they don't need to worry about calculating the 95% playing handicap, as this will all be done in the background for them by the software. In Scotland, the competition software will use the exact course handicap, which is built into the spec, and not the rounded course handicap, to apply the 95% for stroke play. Whereas for team match play formats, there's no software calculating the allowance for us in the background. Without the software calculating the allowance, as an example, for 4-ball better ball, when you take 90% of the rounded up course handicap from the lookup chart, data has shown that roughly 20% of the time it will provide a different allowance compared to applying 90% of the exact course handicap. However, we do want to make the process as easy as possible for members to follow, and we do understand that it may not always be practical for one person in the group having to get a calculator out on their phone to do the exact calculation. Therefore, to make things as straightforward as possible, it would be acceptable for clubs to set a local rule to use the rounded course handicap lookup charts for these formats. We're not saying the actual allowances for team match play can be changed, just that you can use the rounded course handicap before applying the allowance. You could stipulate this in your conditions of competition, for example, for team match play competitions. Clubs should just be aware, though, that although this is much easier for members to follow, it may mean that some players may receive extra shots. Moving on to the next slide, we just wanted to touch on the PCC again, which is the playing conditions calculation. We've already covered the main features of this in previous presentations, and so today we just wanted to cover a couple of the common questions we get. One of these is when you're looking at a player's record within the WHS CDH tab, and then the adjustments column, which you can see on the right-hand side there of the slide. A question we get is, why is the PCC value showing as 0? The reason is that the PCC is auto-applied by the software depending on scores that day, and is actually included within the scoring differential column just to the left, which you can see on the player's record. The only reason it will actually appear in the adjustments column on the right is if it has been manually added, for example, as an away general play score. As the PCC forms part of the scoring differential calculation, it will not be visible on the scoring record to a golfer. However, once we have finished developing the reporting tool, then club administrators will actually be able to view this within a player's record in the future. We have found that the PCC is conservative in nature, and initial data has shown that it does not react as severely as the CSS did before. We have fed this back to the USGA and RNA and asked them to look into this further. It is worth bearing in mind, though, that with the average system of WHS, bad scores affected by difficult conditions on the day won't be included in your best 8, unlike the old system when every score counted, and unless it was a reduction only, it would have resulted in a 0.1 increase. Moving on to the next slide, we will look at the difference of when a hole is not played compared to when a hole is started, but the player does not hole out. WHS is a handicapping system designed to give golfers an equitable and portable handicap, enabling play worldwide in a variety of competition formats. Traditionally, golf courses comprise either 9 or 18 holes, although other layouts such as 12 holes are not uncommon. Course rating, handicapping, and competition formats, however, have evolved around the playing of 18 and 9-hole courses. Even when 9-hole rounds are played, the score needs to be scaled up to an 18-hole equivalent for the handicap record. And in WHS, this is achieved by adding a net par +1 for the first hole not played, and then a net par for the 8 holes to give the gross score for the 9 holes that are not played. In some jurisdictions, match play is an acceptable format of play for handicapping purposes, and in WHS, the scaling up process set out in Rule 3.2 provides the methodology to record a score for unplayed holes when a match is settled before the 18th. Obviously, match play is not an acceptable format to return a score in Scotland, although this is why the hole not started rule first came in countries like the States. It also allows for rounds that have been shortened due to unforeseen circumstances, such as lightning, illness, etc., to still be acceptable for handicapping, provided a minimum number of holes have been completed. During the development of WHS, some jurisdictions, notably some in Europe, recognised the potential that the scaling up process could have to enable clubs to run competitions over courses of intermediate length, such as 12 holes. This can also be used for courses that have 1 or more holes temporarily unavailable for play due to maintenance or flooding, for example, in which case members would just enter a net par. Safeguards are required, however, to ensure that players can only record a genuine hole not played. For example, when this is justified through injury, illness, or bad weather, players are not allowed to just skip holes or choose which holes they do and don't want to play. For example, a player may be on a good score and he or she knows that the last 4 holes are playing really tough. It would not be permitted to just skip these holes to try and protect a score. In examples like that, if an incomplete score is submitted, it should be investigated by the club, and if no valid reason is provided, then the score should be discarded, and the handicap committee could apply a penalty score to the player's record. It would, however, be possible for clubs to hold, for example, a 12-hole or a 14-hole competition set out in advance in their conditions of competition, and the whole field would then receive a scaled-up 18-hole score for handicap purposes. This is in contrast to when a hole is started, but a player does not hole out. Depending on the format of play, for example, in Stableford it would be you record 0 points, or in a stroke play competition, record a 0, and whilst they would be disqualified from the competition, they would receive a net double bogey for handicap purposes. On to the next slide. We have had a number of questions around the course data that we use for handicapping purposes. The WHS methodology for stroke index allocation can be viewed in Appendix E of the Rules of Handicapping booklet. This allocates stroke indexes based on the course rating system, which is part of WHS, and the stroke indices are calculated using the plane difficulty of each hole objectively based on the hole-by-hole course rating data that we collect when we rate your course, and therefore it aligns with the very same information already used to calculate the slope ratings. This ensures a consistent method of calculating net double bogeys and net par adjustments for handicap purposes for all players under WHS. You'll be able to view the default WHS stroke index data in the course field of the VMS platform, which you can see in the USGA column on the scorecard on the right there, in comparison to courses' existing stroke index values in the column just to the left. This is a common question we've had and explains why some stroke index boxes are shown in red compared to the default WHS values. Looking at the two columns, you'll see that the values are actually pretty similar and on a number of holes are actually the same. In testing, we've actually seen very little difference in the scoring differentials when using the different stroke index values, such as in the example here. However, the aim is to have consistency so that stroke indexes match for both competition and for handicap purposes. So clubs, there's two options really available. The first option is clubs can of course continue to use your existing stroke index values for handicap purposes as well as for competitions. If that's the case, please email us at handicapping@scottishgolf.org and we can update the course data for you. Alternatively, the second option which we recommend and which a number of clubs are now doing is to choose to adopt the recommended WHS stroke index values. To do that and to match these up, simply go into your venue courses tab of VMS and overwrite the numbers in the red column there to match the ones on the right, and then save. Often clubs have had their stroke index values in place for a number of years, and many are actually now taking the opportunity to review their stroke indexes. We would recommend clubs to consider the recommended WHS values the next time you're ordering scorecards. I'll now pass you back over to David for the last part of the presentation.
Thanks, Adam. We're still receiving a large number of emails on plus handicap golfers, especially as their course handicap gets lower the higher the slope, which many plus handicapped golfers seem to think is unfair. The important thing to remember here is about equity for all golfers. So when you're explaining the system to the plus golfers, if you use the scratch golfer as the balance point, if the scratch golfer plays, goes to any golf course to play, if you multiply anything by 0, it's 0, so they're always going to be off scratch. So why on a course with a higher slope, should the plus golfer, who's a better golfer than the scratch golfer, move closer to the slope to scratch? Sorry, that would actually create an inequity against the scratch golfer. So just to confirm and to clarify, if the slope is greater than 113, the more a plus handicap will move away from scratch, and if lower than 113, the closer it will move to scratch. We've also received a few questions regarding the score differentials for plus golfers. And if you look at the calculations here, I apologize, there should be a minus in front of the score differential in the last bottom part there. But just for an example, if you look at the calculations here, you'll see that par actually isn't taken into account. So both of these examples here, the player shot 66 on a par 72, but you can see that because of the course rating value is different on one course, even though the slope is lower, the course rate is higher, so the score differential comes out much lower than the course on the right. So it's really important. We have a lot of questions coming in from par golfers say I shot 6 under, some plus handicap golfers, sorry, saying I shot 6 under, why does my score differential look like that? And that's why it's about understanding the calculation and what actually impacts and has an effect on the score differential. So it's important that you look at the calculation and try and explain that to the plus golfers. And the last thing I just want to discuss in the presentation is just a quick update on HIVE. As you can see from the numbers here, it's proved to be a great platform, and we would like to thank everyone who is engaged. It's not only about Scottish Golf delivering learning, but it's also about creating a platform that encourages peer-to-peer learning, and it's been great to see clubs supporting and helping each other out on this platform and forming a community. One thing we have noticed, as I'm sure you have, and we've had a few questions about this, a few comments about this, is it's quite hard to follow a thread if a statement or question is just posted into the general feed. The person who's posted the comment can obviously follow that thread by going to their own profile and clicking on the comment, which takes them straight to the thread, but it is hard for others to follow. I have seen good practice where some users have just simply put following in the comment, which means they can follow that thread. But as I said, it is quite hard if you're just using the general feed all the time for putting in your questions. Also, many of the answers to the questions that are raised on Hive are available in the cards and the resources. So I do need to ask, please, always try and find the information that we've put together in the cards and resources. And if not available in that card, please try and comment at the feed at the bottom of that card. Try not to use the general feed. To help with this, we will be turning off the general feed in the near future, because it is just becoming quite difficult for users to follow threads in that manner. Lastly, if the question isn't relevant to WHS or any of the learning materials on the Hive platform, please do ask that you email us directly for a response. Thank you. So that brings us to the end of the presentation. I understand there was a lot of information there, but we really wanted to make sure that we covered all the topics that we're getting emailed about from all the golf clubs. It's important that you all have the information you need when you're answering golfers' questions and administering your members' handicaps. I'm just going to move on to the FAQ now. Right, Martin, we'll start with you. If a player intends to enter a general play score but forgets to pre-register, I know we've touched base on this, but I think it's really important to double down on it. Can they still add this score after completing the round?
Thanks, David. So the player must pre-register their intent to submit a round in the manner prescribed by the National Association or the home club. If neither of these are met, then the round can't be submitted. In a wrap, the golfer must pre-register before they start their rounds. So for scores submitted via the software of the club or manually, they would need to find out what that pre-registration term is set out by their home club.
Great. And when a golfer cannot complete a round for a valid reason, they need some way to indicate this on the app, or it creates a lot of work for committees. Can you maybe touch base on why it's not in the app there? Okay, so as outlined in the presentation, there's a very few reasons why the golfer should not submit a full round, and the golf club needs to administer this. Golfers should not simply have the opportunity to skip holes or submit an incomplete round to their handicap without a valid reason. Yeah, it's really important to add there. That's actually the main reason why this is not in the app. We want it to be managed by the club, and players shouldn't have the option to misuse or manipulate this functionality for handicap gains. So it's really important, if any incomplete rounds are submitted, that there is a valid reason for those incomplete rounds, or it's in a competition that the golf club set up. It's great. Mike, can you explain what happens if adverse weather means the course is closed and players either suspended or abandoned?
Sure. If the round is being completed by the golfer or a minimum of 10 holes are completed, it can count for handicapping purposes. If the competition itself is abandoned, any score that doesn't meet that criteria would not count for handicapping purposes.
That's great. Thanks, Martin. And one here on how to disable the measured course or the general play option in the WHS platform. Is the recommended way to disable this by unticking the measured course checkbox on the platform? Yeah, that's the correct function to disable the course for general play. And clubs should disable this if the course doesn't meet the measured course criteria. That's great, thank you. Moving over to you, Adam, can you clarify how general play scores or open days, open competitions are collated and forwarded?
Away general play scores can be submitted directly via the Scottish Golf app or the host club's terminal if available. Physical scorecards can also be returned to the home club by the player to be submitted manually. Any open competitions, for example, will be submitted directly to the WHS CDH platform by the software used at that club.
That's great, thanks, Adam. And do non-competitive games or general play scores only count if signed by a player who is Scottish Golf registered?
So any responsible person deemed by the club playing with that person can sign for a general play score.
That's great, thanks, Adam. How can bounce games be considered as handicap counters when there are opportunities for cheating, i.e. not putting out fully and giving gimmies, etc.?
We have built as many safeguards as possible into our app. GPS location, for example, signature verification of the marker with details. Any general play score needs to be played within the rules of handicapping and the rules of golf. And golf is, after all, a game of integrity, and most golfers will play by the rules. Golfers who want to take advantage will do so, whether in competition golf or general play. If we find golfers doing this through our app, they will have their handicap withdrawn, and we strongly recommend golf clubs put a disciplinary procedure in place as well to do the same.
Brilliant. Next one, Adam, if a visiting golfer wants to submit a general play score at our club, do we have any responsibility for processing the score if they're not using the Scottish Golf app?
The responsibility always rests with the home club to make this available. So it is submitted on the day and included in the PCC, then this is an option. Otherwise, the player would take the card back to the home club to be uploaded via the WHS CDH. Any score submitted after the date played will not be retrospectively included in the PCC.
It is one of the main reasons we made sure that functionality was available in our app on the 2nd of November, was to reduce the administrative burden on golf clubs, and so that golfers had a platform where they could travel anywhere in Scotland and submit a score seamlessly for general play. So always recommend, if the golfer has the app, to register for it and to use that functionality, as it will, definitely reduce the burden on both the visiting club and the home club for uploading those scores manually, and it will ensure they're included in the PCC on the day. Thanks, Adam. The next few questions that came in were around the interjurisdictional handicapping or cross-border functionality. So I just wanted to give a quick update on that to say the cross-border integration, obviously for WHS is much bigger than GB&I, but we do understand how important it is for golf clubs who have golfers from England, Wales and Ireland currently as members. It is something we as an organisation have been trying to push well before WHS was being implemented. We definitely wanted it in place for the 2nd of November, but unfortunately others weren't obviously in a place to move forward this as we were. But we have had a confirmation recently that we can now start moving forward with this. So we welcome this as it's vital to all golf clubs' needs. In addition to this, we are also looking outside of GB&I to have integration with other governing bodies who may be members of Scottish golf clubs. The next question that came in was around golfing scholarships in the USA, and can those scores now be returned from competitions in casual rounds? And the answer is yes. These scores from the 2nd of November can now be returned manually to the home club, as long as they meet obviously the rules of handicapping and rules of golf. They can't currently be submitted via the Scottish Golf app because we don't have access to that jurisdiction's course rating data. So currently those scores would need to be sent back to the golf club with all the verification in place, and the golf club could upload those manually by selecting the away general play tab in the WHS platform. Last question on this, and it's really an important one, is how does a golf with a CDH generated in England transfer it to Scotland? And I think there's been some confusion in the past. I mean, it's always been the case that a home player in Scotland requires a Scottish golf CDH number. The CDH systems of each home nation do not recognise CDH numbers from different jurisdictions. And this is also one of the reasons some clubs had issues during transition, because the correct process wasn't followed and these golfers were not set up with a Scottish Golf ID. So I know in some platforms you can input English CDH numbers into the system, but the scores would never have been sent to the Scottish Golf platform because it doesn't recognise a number that starts with, I think, a 1 in England, a 6 in Wales, I think it's an 8 in Ireland. So it was always the right process that these golfers had to be set up with a Scottish Golf CDH number. And this is the case moving forward under WHS. If a player is transferring to Scotland as a home member, they must be set up with a Scottish Golf CDH number, and their record can be transferred, but it will have to be uploaded manually by the club using the away general play tab. Moving back to you, Martin, can medals be played off any tee, for example, multi-tee competitions?
Yeah, if the club wish to run a multi-tee competition, it's both recommended and permitted. The tees used for the competition must have a valid course rating.
Yeah, Another one here on course rating, Martin. Our course has changed a bit since its last rating 15 years ago. I hope we rated this year as our signage and cards are being renewed.
Okay, so clubs are rated every 10 years as part of the cycle. So it may be your course already has a new rating which has not been communicated to the club. Golf clubs need to be aware when ordering course furniture and scorecards that the rating will change when this has been completed.
That's great. I just want to give a quick update on course rating. Obviously, last year, because of the current pandemic, we weren't able to do any course ratings, but obviously we're quite hopeful this year that we can get back out on the course and do some course rating once it becomes permissible to do so. Any of the courses that were due to be rated last year will obviously be put first on the list for this year, but we are hoping to get out and get some courses rated this year. Obviously, an important thing to remember is I know some courses will have had course furniture set up at the club and scorecards and stuff like that. Your course rating potentially will change. Well, it probably will change when we come out and re-rate the course based on the new upgrades and the new changes to the course rating system. So it is one thing to consider to find out potentially when your course is due to be rated, and consider how much scorecards or furniture that you're looking to purchase, and that the fact that the course rating boards, if you have purchased them, will potentially need to be changed. So it's always worthwhile checking with who's provided them for you to ensure there's a process in place to help change those quite seamlessly. Mark, can you explain how the PCC will work in practice, and how or if competitions are closed off after play?
Okay, so the PCC takes in all scores from a golf club on a certain day. This includes competition scores, general play scores, both 9 and 18 holes. Once the calculation has taken place that night, any scores being added afterwards would not be included in that PCC.
It's important to add that competitions do not need to be closed. Under WHS, once the score is submitted into the software, it should automatically go to the WHS platform, where I know in the past you had to close the competition to get a CSS result. Where under WHS, that's no longer necessary. The score should go to the platform as soon as it's been submitted via the software. One has come in here. How are cuts or rises in handicap determined? Is the standard scratch in the CSS taken into account?
So WHS is based on an average of your best 8 scores out of your last 20 rounds. Or if you don't have 20 rounds on your scoring record, it's an average of how many were in there. Your handicap will go up or down based on these, and handicap changes will be more significant than the older system based on scores coming on and off a player's record. The standard scratch score and the competition scratch score are no longer part of WHS, so course ratings as slope ratings are now used.
Brilliant, thank you. Over to you, Adam. Can it be simplified adjusting someone's handicap? For example, if it becomes obvious that an individual's handicap is nowhere near their ability, you can apply an adjustment which is applied to all their counting scores, but leaves you with no idea what their adjusted handicap would be until after you've applied the adjustment.
Handicap review should only take place once a year. Because of the nature of the average system, a player's handicap can change more significantly than under the previous system. And the recommendation is to allow the system to run its course. Obviously, if there are major inaccuracies, you could perform a review and an adjustment. But if you make for example, one-shot adjustment to the record, then even though it applies this to every score on the record, it will still change the handicap index by that same amount. The adjustment only applies to those scores on the record already, and not any new ones that come in after that.
That's great, thanks, Adam. And is 95% applied to general play scores, the 95% playing allowance, I think they're referring to?
No, so there's no playing handicap allowance applied for general play scores. Only the course handicap is required, and it's to remember the point that it's the course handicap that should go on the scorecard is used for every round, and the playing handicap is just there for calculating competition results.
Great. We had a few come in on setting division limits and what the recommended handicap used is for setting those divisional limits or entry for competition purposes. So just to clarify, Adam, is the handicap index, the course handicap, or the playing handicap? What would be the best practice for clubs here?
Yeah, the recommendation is for setting divisions is for a competition is to use the handicap index, as that's most players can access. It's they know what their index is, and that's what to stick to.
Brilliant. Question here on I think it's come in about when a player is registered for a competition but not submitted a card, is there an exception report run at the end of the day for the match and handicap to follow up on?
So that would be up to your ISV provider to check with, and if they offer that.
Brilliant. And the last question, I'll pick up this one, is where we'll get iPads to input casual scores as was originally stated. Now that was part of the plan back before WHS was implemented, because general play scores were going to need to be uploaded only through the Scottish Golf platform. Now that that's changed and that all scores can be uploaded via all software providers who have a license or an approved software provider under WHS, this is no longer necessary. So we won't be sending out iPads for scores, because all those scores can be uploaded through the provider who you use at the golf club. Ladies and gentlemen, that does bring us a close to today's Zoom panel call. Hopefully we've given everyone the confidence that based on the data we have seen so far, the new WHS system is working 100% as designed. But also it's important to set expectation based on feedback from other governing bodies that went live at the start of 2020, that this will be a transition period for us all as we come to grips with the new system. But after all the hard work that golf clubs and Scottish Golf have put in, it's great to be a part of the new World Handicap system that embraces all golfers. I'm sure we will all benefit from the system, and it will help us grow the game here in Scotland. We would like to once again thank you all for joining us today, and we hope hearing from the team here at Scottish Golf has given you some valuable insight and answered many of your questions. Don't forget, if you would like to catch up on any of today's discussion or to find out more information, please visit us at our website at www.scottishgolf.org. Thank you for tuning in, stay safe, and a very good day to you.